Joining us this evening. Welcome to our Discovery Wednesday class with Guy. My name is John. I'm happy to be the host for our session today. In a moment, Guy will present the material he's prepared on the topic that you see below you on the screen. He will give about a 60-minute talk on that material, and then afterwards we'll take a short break and then come back for an open discussion, a Q&A with those of you online and the students in the room. And together, hopefully, we will just deepen our understanding of Guy's material and what he's shared with us just a little bit more. It's so helpful to hear the questions and comments from those of you online and to hear the same from the students in the room and to put them together with Guy's talk and work with it. So we hope you'll stay for the entire session. It lasts up until about 7:30 our time. For those of you online, please, again, communicate with us, participate in the class. I know that Guy will invite you at some point to do so. So please send in your comments in the chat area. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, please raise your hand if you're on GoToWebinar and talk directly to Guy. And again, let's work together tonight. Finally, before I read the topic and the key lesson, just a reminder to the students in the room, please check your cell phones and make sure you've turned them off. So, here's our topic, everyone. Overthrow the unseen king of useless actions and start ruling your own life. Here's the key lesson. To see that taking thought leads to naught is the beginning of the end of all useless solutions.
Good evening, everyone. And good evening, good morning, good afternoon to you who are joining us wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is. It is always the right time to lend yourself to something that is trying to give you an understanding that can be found nowhere else other than in the moment when you give yourself to the wish to understand. That's what all of our talks are about, every meeting, including our Wednesday nights when we have our discussion. And if you've never joined us on a Wednesday nights we have a kind of a group involvement. We invite the men and women in the room and all of you, wherever you are in the world, to participate in what we are working to understand in that particular session. Now, I need to make a few opening comments connected to a broader theme. This coming weekend, Friday, a couple talks on Saturday and Sunday, I'm going to give roughly 4 talks. And the topic of these special weekends that we hold once every quarter here at the foundation is there's no greater joy in life than this. And one of the challenges I have as a presenter of these ideas is that I have to realize that not everyone is joining me all the time in the same place, in the same order, and that it's most difficult to lay out what is essentially an entire presentation, a theme, where by the nature of the audience, although I wish it weren't so, and I can't tell you strongly enough, look, maybe it's not what I'm doing or what I'm teaching, but if you find something that's true, sweet God, hitch yourself to it. You connect yourself to it. You give yourself to it. Don't waste anything. Don't waste any time. You don't know how rare it is to find something that brings light into your life. But the problem with the light that comes into your life from these classes is the first thing you see by that light is that you've been deceived by what you've called light. And nobody wants that. But I tell you, if you can get a taste of what is true, it can open up inside of you something that is unstoppable. You belong to a flow that began before you were born and that will never finish and that you're intended to be a part of. And that's what these meetings are for, to help you understand that to belong to that greater life that is endless, that is eternal, that's the real joy in life. So I want to set out here this idea that I'm going to talk to you tonight as an introduction to the weekend, certain ideas. But that doesn't mean that on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that those talks won't be forwarding these ideas, because they will. But my plan is that each and every one will hold in itself, of itself, some kind of nugget that you can take and work with, because that's the point. And I would add that if you work with any of the real ideas that are presented here, you can't help but discover what is true, because they belong to a part of yourself that you just don't know yet, which is the purpose of the real work anywhere and any time on this planet, which is to help men and women remember what they've forgotten. And you've forgotten who you are. And there's reasons why you've forgotten who you are, and that's one of the reasons that we have these meetings, including tonight. So a little hint over the upcoming days. I'm going to talk about the joy of being in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. You know, when you're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, you know there's nothing else to do. You're done. There's no leftovers, no residuals. I'm going to talk about the joy of being useful. Most of us know nothing at all about being useful. We know how to use people, but we don't know how to be useful to the broader light, to the grand life. We don't know how to be useful to the divine. And until you can learn how to be useful to the divine, your life is useless. You may be a special person. There may be people that throw themselves at your feet and say, I love you, I love you, I love you. But until you have a useful relationship with the moment that is given to you to complete yourself as given by the divine, your moments are useless. Which, by the way, is why we study here. Most of us have started to recognize, I've been here, done that, gone here, I've eaten everything under the sun and then some, and I'm still as empty as an old clamshell. I'm going to talk about this evening the joy of self-knowledge as an introduction to the series of talks. The joy of self-knowledge. Why the joy of self-knowledge? Certainly you've heard the expression, maybe you don't understand it. Know the truth and the truth will set you free. But nowhere when it was written, know the truth and the truth will set you free, was written like the truths that don't interfere with what you love and get rid of anything that interferes with what you do love. Nowhere in the world does it say that. Everything says know the truth, and it doesn't put any disclaimers on the truth. You and I have lots of disclaimers on the truth, do we not? So that's what we're going to study. But know the truth and set me free, but what is it going to set me free from? You know, we have this grand idea about a truth that's going to set us free. And when we have this idea, like we talked about on last Sunday, we're all identified with this image of a time when we will become free. And we call that the freedom we're looking for. But it never dawns on us that we wouldn't be looking for a freedom in a time to come if there weren't something that we were engaged in this moment that was a little bit troublesome, to say the least. So the whole idea of seeking a time to come begins with understanding there is a time in my life all the time that I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing what I'm doing, let alone looking at the past where all of my actions have proven useless to date. I'm just not interested in it. Are you interested in it? You go, no, I'm not interested. No, not really. I'm not really interested. I say I am, but what happens when the moment comes? This is what we're going to look at. What happens when the moment comes? When all is said and done, here's why the truth, the joy of self-knowledge. When all is said and done, the only thing that you and I suffer from ever is self-ignorance. End of story. is the only thing that a man or a woman suffers from. Now, I'm not saying that you're not going to suffer. Certainly, I know physically there's a lot of stuff to suffer with this body. This body is, on the downward leg of this journey, it's not going, this is grand. But even that suffering can be a kind of joy. We'll talk about that this coming week. I find joy in my infirmities, said St. Paul. How in the name of God can a person find joy in their infirmities unless it is through those infirmities that a person finds a real strength, which is what we're intended to find through those infirmities. But let me not get off on too deep of a tangent. Self-ignorance, on the other side of the fact, and the joy of self-knowledge is that, and I think some of you know that, there's no end to what I can discover. There's no end to the discoveries. There's no end to the epiphanies. There's no end to the aha moments. There's no end to them. And I don't care where or what you're doing. When you see something beautiful, it's beautiful for the first time. So there's the joy of the first time that's connected with true self-knowledge. Because true self-knowledge is the necessity of being where you are, doing what you're doing as you're doing it, because that's where beauty rests. And that's what true self-knowledge finally brings you to, because it finally separates the wheat from the chaff, and everything that is part of ignorance is recognized as such. And as it is released, so are you. You're released from the weight, the pain, the burden of believing that you know what is true, when it's evident that if you're suffering in that moment, you don't know what's true. So let's make a little transition here. I have several stories to tell you tonight. Ready? So here's what we'll make them. We'll make them brothers. And one of the brothers is a fairly successful businessman. He made sacrifices, able to achieve certain things. And the other brother is a would-be successful businessman, someone who is forever and always working in some way or another to invent something. And he's been working on one invention for like 142 years. Now, please understand, this is your story. You don't know it yet. This is yours. Have you not been trying to invent happiness for the last 142 years? Have you not been trying to invent reasons why you aren't happy, so that in finally getting that all worked out, then you'll know what to do? He's been trying to invent, and what he's manufactured so far is a large, sort of lifelike looking person, but it's got all these extraneous parts connected to it, bells and whistles and turning things and smoke that comes out of one side, wheels that turn but don't touch the ground. The thing is a true Frankenstein creature because he keeps adding things to it when it doesn't do why he invented it. Remember, this is a true story. So finally one day the brother comes and he's his brother down there in the workshop, and he's just a mess. Oil and grease and wheels and gears and levers and switches everywhere stuck to his hair. And he says, you know what, brother, I don't understand. This thing doesn't do anything. It shakes, it smokes, it kind of jerks around like that. But the truth is, you keep trying to repair, you keep make it into something. When are you going to finally give up on this thing and recognize it's not going to become whatever it is that you've imagined? I don't understand why you keep messing with it. And you know what his brother said? You wait and see. One of these days, it's going to really do something. One of these days, it's really going to do something. One of these days, when I straighten you out, my life will work the way it's meant to work. One of these days when I get everything ironed out with my family and friends, one of these days when my money is finally secure, one of these days when I'm not afraid because I've got everything in place, you'll see then my inventions will work. Everybody follow me so far? Now, bringing you in, not yet for the list, if you really knew that there was nothing, how many of you have invented endless explanations for why your life is like it is? And have you ever had an endless explanation that wasn't connected to an endless possibility connected to the promise of I'm finally through that, I fixed it, now I'm going to get to the other side, yes or no? So if you knew, this is critical now, because you don't, if you knew you could not fix something, not to mention the expense of the endless repair kits, you know what I mean by repair kits? If you knew that, how long would you keep investing yourself in something that promises to make things right but never does? If you knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that every time you got into that workshop and started tinkering, thinking, if you knew that that was never going to get everything right, how long would you keep doing it? You would just stop, wouldn't you? You want to know how a mind gets quiet? Your mind gets quiet when you stop tinkering with thought, trying to produce the troubles that thought creates. That's when your mind gets quiet. When you finally see through this endless chatter, this constant reconfiguring whatever the problem is and what the promise is tomorrow, because every last thing that I'm getting my hands on belongs to something that was broken when I started working with it. And it's not that the imagined idea is broken. What's broken is the level of consciousness that hopes it can find its true self through anything it imagines. That's what's broken, is this level of consciousness. And it's not even really broken. It's broken because we have a wrong relationship with it. One day, as your relationship changes, you'll begin to see everything is just exactly the way it's supposed to be here on this strange planet called Earth. It is. It's a very strange planet. All right. Write this down. We're working towards a big question. Are you excited? I don't think so. I don't feel that excitement yet. Write this down. Useless actions are born out of useless negative thoughts and feelings. And all useless negative states are born out of useless what? All negative states are born out of useless what? All right, hold on. I knew you wouldn't have it right away. Is this time for the other story? Okay, it is. Imagine you're with a group of people, you've paid $1 gazillion to go someplace, like to the market. And everybody's sitting there after this extraordinary journey, and you're in quite a beautiful place. And everybody's kind of excited, they're talking about stuff. And then you look over and there's one person, Mr. Grumpy, Sicilian. Now, the first mistake you can make is ask, why are you grumpy? I swear to God, people can't wait to talk about their problems. You want to change your life. Stop talking about your problems. God, you don't see. It's like sorry for the expression, it's like a river of blood. It just pours out, it never stops, and you never realize it doesn't stop. You have no pity on the people that you talk to because they're not interested in your problems. You're not even interested in your problems. So here this person sitting there all grumpy, and finally somebody says to them, what's going on? We're in the most beautiful place in the world. We're the most fortunate people in the world. Why are you unhappy? You know what the person says? It's not quite the way I imagined it. You want to know why there's no appreciation and no gratitude in this world? Because we live from a consciousness that never stops comparing what it wants and imagines it has to have to what it is that it's given. And the greatest joy there is in this life is to realize that you are always being given everything you need to change your present consciousness that is never content with what it's given, because it never quite matches what it expects in that moment. I'm not saying there aren't a few moments of gratitude, but if you weigh on a scale gratitude versus resistance, which way does the scale go? Resistance. To recognize resistance as the source of all useless actions is the beginning of you freeing yourself from useless struggle. To recognize that resistance to any given moment is not just the source of all useless actions, but it is also the freedom from the wreckage that follows all useless actions. Isn't there always some kind of wreckage that follows a useless action? Yes or no? Let's build a list. Let's bring the list up, please, on the board so everybody can participate, and I will prime the pump as always. We're doing this for the sake of gaining self-knowledge. The ideas are not self-knowledge, but the recognition of where we fit into the experience begins to help us see where it is that we are improperly identified with certain states. Here's the name of the list we're going to build, everybody out there in the room. Name some useless action that you know from past experience is not only useless, but has caused you and likely others some form of useless suffering. One more time. Name some useless action that you know from past experience is not only useless, but has caused you and likely others some form of useless suffering. Let me prime the pump ever so quickly. I'm going to ask, useful or useless? Ready? Trying to change someone into what you want them to be. Out loud? It's worse than useless, isn't it? Because the more you try to change somebody into what you want them to be, the more resistant they are to you. And sure that the only problem they have is you. Second, useful or useless? Fawning for the approval of someone that you think can give you something. Why is fawning useless? Why is fawning useless? Well, first of all, not only does it attract from the other person the opposite of what you expect, but all fawning is born out of the fear of rejection. You never fawn without fearing the rejection of who it is that you're fawning in front of, whether it's him or her or what they can give you. So the very act of fawning actually belongs to, the useless action belongs to the nature that believes it has to be approved of or it's nothing. Do you understand? A couple more and then you're on. Number 3, useful or useless? Trying to get others to see where they're wrong. How does that go? Useful or useless? All right, you're on. Patricia. Giving advice. Cast not your pearls before swine. Is giving advice, wait a minute, when they haven't asked for it? Is that useful or useless? It's worse than useless, because you win the enmity of the person you're beating over the head with your knowledge. Who else in the room? Terry? Huh? Blaming. Absolutely useless. We're going to talk about blaming in another portion of this talk. See, there's useless actions, and then there's something that hides useless actions. You'll see, resistance is the father of useless actions, but it is also the king of disguises, as we'll see. Boy, the board is just flowing already. Rebecca, overcommitting. That's pretty useless. Trying to fix someone else's wrong thinking. We touched on that one. Complaining, big one. Randall, pleasing someone to get approval. Anybody in the room? Let's keep going. Debbie.
Berating myself.
Yeah, judging myself. Loathing myself is absolutely useless. Now, so far so good. Let me go on. Claudia, trying to control, how about this? Trying to control the outcome of anything. Useful or useless? Now, you say it's useless, if I might jump in, and yet, here's the thought. But if I don't control this, things are going to get really problematic. Failing to see that it's still problematic. It doesn't matter how many problems you have solved through control. The issue of control belongs to a nature that's always in fear, because only fear tries to control moments in order to keep its identity in place. On the board, Joan, judging, yes. Gino, complaining about the state of the world. That was one I had on my list too. There is nothing more useless than belonging to a group. Period. And that includes what you call your family. Not that there shouldn't be familial love, but you belong to your family for the sense of security they give you, and also for the sense of yourself as being someone special as you sit in judgment of your family members for not being as good as you are. Yes or no? Brian, fear of not being able to solve an imagined future problem. I mean, think about that, Brian. Everybody understand? So fear of the future. Because you can't have fear of the future without a problem in the future, can you? Where does fear of the future come from? From imagining something negative. So I've imagined something negative, and then I try to figure out how to save myself from my own imagination. Useful or useless? Useless. On the board. Boy, they're really rolling in. Trying to get, Denise says, trying to get someone else not to procrastinate. That's very funny. Yes, Gloria, trying to buy someone's love. Codependency, creating dependency. It seems useful because it keeps in place the sense of myself, but in the end, there's nothing more useless because it always proves to be my downfall. Not only do I resist and resent someone who doesn't appreciate everything I give them, but I actually sit and judge them for it, believing that I'm doing this out of love. Useless. Assuming I know the reason for someone else's actions. Yeah, here's something absolutely useful. Thinking about why somebody did what they did. Useful or useless? And yet, what do you spend your time all day doing? Why in the hell is that person like that? I just don't understand why they have to be like that. Have you ever had that thought? And when you get that thought, what comes next? The next useless thing. I'm going to show them where they're wrong. Judith, predicting outcomes, of course. Could be more useful? What's that saying? Men make plans and God has a good laugh, or something like that. In the room, please, David. Intellectualizing. David said, intellectualizing. Now, what does it exactly mean, said intellectual David, about intellectualizing? What does it mean? It means I'm going to think this sucker to death. I'm going to sink my teeth into this thought, and I'm never going to let it go until it finally screams, "You're right!" Except the only thing that screams is your jaw from clenching. You get tension jaw, whatever they call it. Barbara.
Planning what I'm going to say to someone.
What could be more useless than planning a speech? Because it's not just what I'm going to say to somebody. If I've written it out and thought it through, I'm up on the dais there with a big board, and I'm laying out my notes. Trying to prepare in advance for any moment in order to protect yourself is what? Wow, this keeps going. Ellen.
Feeling guilty.
Ellen, I'm like psychic. How did I know? Ellen would say, feeling guilty. What's more useless than guilt? Why am I guilty? Listen to this. Because the last useless action I took didn't pan out the way I hoped it would. Therefore, I'm less than I imagined myself to be. So not only am I a terrible person, but I'm guilty for being a terrible person. Right, Elle? Absolutely. I love that you can smile now at these things, Ellen. You never used to be able to do that. That's a good thing. Who's got a hand? John.
Asking somebody if they're mad.
Does he do that? Does he do that quite a bit, Debbie? Yeah, John said, what's more you why is asking somebody if they're mad? Give me a moment. I can't do it. Are you mad at me? What's more useless than asking someone if they're mad at you? First of all, if you have to ask the question, you're in the wrong place to start with. But why is asking someone if they're mad at you useless? Anybody? Because all I want to do is somehow or other be what you need me to be in that moment, even though I can't stand the fact that I have to be something other than I am and that you've judged me. So I'm asking, are you mad at me? Because I know you've judged me and I resist the judgment, and I believe somehow or other if I can just get you to go, well, you know, honey, blah, 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 blah. Wait, then you're going to work it out. How many have conversations filled with enmity that are useful or useless? Is resentment useful or useless? Out loud? Useless. Maybe I should stop now. We've got like 3,000 of these things. All right, this is pretty good. Some of them we didn't get to, but one of them I'm just going to throw in as one of the more useless things a person could possibly do. How many of you try to avoid unwanted moments? Please tell me, how does it go when you try to avoid an unwanted moment? Are you the one making the choice to avoid the moment? It seems like it. That's the usefulness of it. It feels like I really know what I'm doing. I need to get away from this problem, this person, this condition. But what am I really trying to escape when I try to avoid an unwanted moment? What am I actually trying to escape? My own weakness, my own ignorance, because I don't understand the value of the moment. Can I escape my own ignorance by running from it? No. So is running from unwanted moments useful or useless? So far, so good. Now, we built a heck of a list of things that we do every day. Do we not do every one of these things virtually every day? Transition, part 2. What time is it? Good. How come I don't know this? You just said as a group we had at least 40, maybe 50 ways to leave a useless life, and all we do is just list all these useless things we do all day long. How about daydreaming? Thinking. How come I don't know it's useless? Wouldn't that be a good question? If I do useless things, how useful can I be? Not just to myself and the people that I love, but to the divine itself. Because I can't be useful to the divine until I'm first inwardly useful to myself. It's impossible. You want to be useful to what you call this broader world. You're not just not useful to the world, but everything that you do to be useful to the world is given you to do by a useless action. Because we just described all of these useless actions. Why don't I know it? Ready? Because we're talking about where do all these useless actions come from? Where do all these useless actions come from? Resistance. You can't have a useless action that isn't born in resistance. You must see it for yourself. Can we go through that list? If I'm trying to change someone and it's a useless action, why do I want to change somebody? Because I'm resisting them. Something about them is really getting my goat, and I don't want to be a goat. I don't want to be judging people. Why do I judge people? Why do I judge people? Resistance. I resist them. Same reason I want to change them. Why am I, speaking of more useless actions, endless distractions? As if I haven't distracted myself enough. When I come to the end of everything I've distracted myself with, what does my mind come up with? More distractions. Are distractions useful or useless for a man or a woman who wants to grow into a useful relationship? Useful or useless? Useless. And where does all of this what's the father of all this distraction? Out loud. Resistance. To what? Yes, my wife said it. I don't want to be me. I'm not happy being me. I don't want to be where I am. I don't particularly like the way things are with where I am. and I don't like the experience I'm having. All of that is resistance based on a certain kind of unseen pain that comes up, and because that resistance requires a partner, here's the transition, resistance has 10,000 disguises. Remember I asked, why don't we see it? Because we're talking about all this useless action. Why don't I see these useless actions? Because resistance has 10,000 different disguises. Wouldn't that make sense? I don't recognize it in the moment that it appears. Why don't I recognize it? Hello? One of the reasons is because something as part of that structure is always, by the way, uselessly justifying in some useless faction what I just did. So I take a useless action, and while I'm taking the useless action, believing that this is the most useful thing I could possibly do, and then I find out I've just got, here's another story. A couple of people work for a homeowner, big homeowner. Let's say they've got 2 or 3 people that live in the house and take care of stuff. And they whisper amongst themselves about the owner, because the owner spends an inordinate amount of time behind a certain locked door that only he has the key to, but from out of which you can hear from time to time certain explicatives come rising up, certain shouting and yelling and sounds of anger, and he's in there by himself, like he's talking to somebody. And they're trying to figure out what's going on, and one of them, who's been there a long time, says, well, I know what's going on behind the closed door. What's going on behind the closed door? What is behind the closed door? Because if I knew that, I might have some clue. He said, the owner here spends endless hours tinkering with and then trying to reassemble the remainders of past useless actions. What do you think about all day? It may not occur to you that you're in thought all the time for naught. What do I think about? I'm thinking about past actions that didn't work out. Because as I uselessly go through those past actions with my intellect, that same intellect that is taking part in that process is busy reassembling all of the various parts as if it can put something together from the past that's going to produce a present awareness. Do you understand that? Okay, transition. An OMG moment. You got one? Anything, something just like that. And in a split second, you and I both know and it isn't amazing? You can be doing something with no awareness of how irritable or tense or angry you are. And in a heartbeat, you can be about a heartbeat away from a stroke, because there's just this sudden inside of you. It's amazing, isn't it? Where does that come from? And what comes of those moments? That's what we're talking about. So again and again and again, yes or no, we reach these moments out of the clear blue sky when all of a sudden there's this big problem. And to the point, in spite of all of the changes that I've made, I'm right back in that same state again, trying to figure out what do I do with this state again. And when I'm trying to figure out what to do with this state, I'm in the grip of resistance, am I not? So here I am, and more times than it's possible to count, person, place, circumstance is summarily what? Why am I feeling this pain? We're talking about one of the 10,000 disguises of resistance, of false actions. Why I don't know it. What would be one of these 10,000 disguises? I'm hinting at it. If I'm sitting here and I'm full of what? Towards someone or something. What am I full of? Blame. Blame. Resistance hides behind blame. Because the moment that you have this sudden resistance you are sure that that negative reaction is pointing to someone or something outside of you that is responsible for the pain that you're in. And that's why any action you take predicated on that conclusion is a what? Useful or useless action. Over and over again. Name something that changes, find out it didn't change. So now I'm asking you, let's name one thing that never changes in spite of all the changes that we make. Let's name one thing, I've been hinting at it the whole time, that never changes in spite of all the changes that we make. Pat said thinking about ourselves? No. I mean, yes, that's true. But we're looking at useless actions here. And of course that is one. But I'm looking at one thing in particular. What is the one thing that never changes no matter how many changes, how many useless changes I make? What? Dissatisfaction. All right, so my reaction, these are all accurate words. But where does this dissatisfaction come from? Where do these negative reactions come from? Where does all this thought about myself coming from? The same exact thing. An unconscious nature full of resistance in the moment to anything that has challenged its idea, its image of itself. Every last useless action is born out of an unconscious relationship with resistance that tells us when it is prodded, here is the problem, here is the path, get to it. And we never think to ourselves that that resistance is hiding behind what it is blamed, because the moment we know what to blame, we're so sure that we know the solution, we never question the action we take. Have you not seen that? How quick we are like that with actions, what we call actions? The rapidity of that action is born out of a self, a consciousness that has no idea what's going on, that only knows how to do one thing. Where does all of this resistance come from? What is the nature of all of this resistance before we get into these 10,000 disguises? What is the nature of all these forms of resistance? This innate conflict. I've been hinting at it again. Anybody? Close. Want and not want. I know what should be. This is what is. What is not the way it's supposed to be. You're not the way you're supposed to be. Useless action, fix you. I'm not the way I'm supposed to be. Useless action, hate myself, spend more money on useless, ridiculous solutions. There is an essential conflict in this consciousness that we are ignorant of. And until we begin to awaken to its ceaseless action inwardly, which is what? Something in me, without me knowing it, compares every last instant to what it expects the moment to be like, so that the split second that you're not, it's not, they're not what it was supposed to be, I'm filled with a useless resistance that gives rise to a negative reaction that points to the problem outside of me, and resistance has hidden itself again. That consciousness has hidden itself again. 10,000 disguises. Everybody following me? So what are some of these disguises now? We made a list of all the ways that are useless actions. I hinted at one of the disguises, blame. What's another way in which resistance disguises itself, Terry? Instantaneously defending myself. And you can see this was the problem I had when I was putting together the talk, because defending myself is clearly useless, but it belongs to a useless part of myself that believes that I cannot be insulted, nobody should disrespect me at any point, so I defend myself. The minute that I'm caught up in that defensive act, resistance is hiding itself in the sense of, you're attacking me. You're attacking me. Just looking at you, I feel like I'm attacked. Have you ever judged somebody without knowing anything about them? How do you get to that place? I've just described it to you. Anybody else? John.
Justifying my negatives.
This is one of the biggest ones. I have this at the end of mine. one of the unbelievable, and yet one day it'll be inconceivable to you that you never recognize it, is why in the name of God am I always explaining myself to myself? Am I not always justifying why I'm worried about my health, worried about my money, worried about my family, worried about him, her, this, that, worried about the government, worried about the sky that may be falling, worried about the climate? I got more things that I'm worried about than I know what to do with. And I'm going to ask you, I was going to put this at the start of the talk. What has any of those actions produced born out of your resistance to what is? Has any one of those actions changed anything real in this world? It hasn't. This nature, and it is a nature, by the way, this fallen consciousness, this resistance that is divided up into want and not want, it is snuck its way in and woven itself into this consciousness and the world that this consciousness has created so thoroughly that we now believe that bickering governments, bickering countries, bickering people, we actually believe that there's a right side and a wrong side to their hatred. They're both on the wrong side because both of them are following a useless suggestion to produce a useless action that will in turn create the next pain and the next problem that will only compound the entire complexity of a consciousness that never stops contradicting itself with its own actions, I might add. Everybody following? So what's another one? Eric? Passive aggressiveness, for sure. Absolutely. Everybody knows pretty much what that is. Chris?
Overreacting.
This is how many of you ever think to yourself when you go, like that? I'm not pointing fingers. Do you ever think to yourself in a moment like that that's a useless action? Do you? Do you never do? Because when am I more real than when I'm in the hands of a useless action? Now, if I'm actually more real because I'm in the hands of a useless action, what does that tell me about the reality of that consciousness? Is it real? Is anything I do in the grip of it useful or useless? Useless. But is it going to change you? Is it? I hope to God that this study that we're doing will at least seed in your heart and mind at least a suspicion that in the moment where you're in the grip of that, you'll find out, wait a minute, how many times have I been like this? Useless reaction gives rise to useless action. Useless action gives rise to useless reactions and relationships, and all it does is just seed itself and seed itself and seed itself. One day you have to think to yourself, you know what? I'm sitting here and suddenly I'm afraid. Suddenly I'm full of fear. Now, how many times have I been full of fear? Can you count them? How many times have you been full of anxiety? Can you count them? How many enemies do you have? Can you count them? Almost not. How many times do I do that before one day I'm sitting, oh, you know what? I've been betrayed. I'm in the midst of a consciousness that is betraying itself because it's telling me what's useful right now while I'm afraid is to protect what I fear losing. That's what it says. But don't do it like you always did it because that was useless. Please let that sink in. Don't do it the way you've done it before because clearly that's useless. So here's the new way to do what's useless. But it doesn't say here's the new way to do what's useless. It says here's a useful new way to protect a fear. Now, is it useless or useful to protect a psychological, fearful nature? Out loud. Do you have any doubt about that? If I ask somebody, why are you mad at me? I'm asking, are you mad at me because I'm afraid that I won't get and be with you what I need to get and be with you? Yes or no? So it's fear that's asking the question. So what is useless always hides behind some form of fear, doesn't it? Please, this is what the disguises. How about enabling people? How about is enabling people useful or useless? Out loud, please. Some of you just don't want to say it. What's more useless than you sitting here and being afraid to admit that what you do every day is useless? Why are you here? Enabling others is absolutely useless. In fact, it's worse than useless. Why is it worse than useless? Anybody want to venture a guess? Because not only I'm not just ruining you, I can't ruin you until I've ruined myself. So any way in which I create dependency in another human being is me afraid that if they're not dependent on me, somehow or other they won't want me and need me the way I want to be needed. And I'm terrified of that. So if I'm terrified of not being needed, what am I really like? Am I useful to myself or anyone else? Or am I selling my soul and taking everyone downstream with me in a useless action? Do you see it? Anybody else? What else is you? Barbara. And this is one of the talks that I'm going to give over the Joy Weekend. What could be more useless than trying to be something that I'm not? Well, see, to me, this is joy. You're not so joyous right now, but all I know how to do is to manage my appearance. I dress. Charlie puts on makeup. I do all these things to do what? To get you to see me the way I want to be seen. And I don't know that you're just judging me tooth and nail because I'm not seeing you the way you want to be seen. So you get a bunch of people together at a party and everybody's looking to everybody else to affirm them and who they are in that moment. So is anybody actually at the party? Who's having the party? The father of resistance. A nature set against itself that draws everybody together for the purpose of creating more of itself through creating in these individuals the useless action of judging oneself and judging others and maintaining the incredible pain of wanting to be seen as something special. There is nothing more useless than wanting to appear special. And yet it's like hardwired, isn't it? Anybody else? Maybe we'll go on. Let me get to the exercise part of this. So we've talked about useless actions. Do we have a good list? And we've talked about how there is a father, there is this master of disguise, that resistance is absolutely a master of disguising itself. And this is one of the useless actions, but just to make it ultimately clear before I go on, one of the ways in which resistance hides itself, disguises itself, is through complaining. Resistance hides itself in confusion. Look, when I'm confused, it's because I am caught up trying to prove to myself that I should know what I don't, or that someone knows what I ought to. So here I am, and I'm confused. Do I know? If I do, I'm not confused. If I don't know, why am I confused over not knowing? Other than I have an image of myself as someone who should never be confused. So there's resistance, isn't there? If I don't know, I don't know. This is one of the big problems that men and women on this planet have. Talk about a useless action, pretending to know. Pretending to be someone. Useless. But when it comes over to me to do that, am I thinking to myself, this is useless? Or am I thinking to myself, how useful am I? All right. Nice deep breath. We're going to get into our exercise. The joy of discovering what's beyond resistance is unimaginable because it's not found in the opposites, which is the only place we know where to look. The joy of discovering what's beyond resistance is unimaginable because it's not found in the opposites, the only place we know to look for relief. Rather, the joy of discovering what's beyond resistance is in the end of the imagined self born of them, of those opposites. The end of a self always trying to save itself. That's the joy of what's beyond resistance. When we talk about resistance, we always talk about this idea. It's a quote, something I like. On the other side of the resistance is? On the other side of the resistance is the flow. I never get to the flow. Why? Because I'm captured by one of the disguises of resistance that's giving me a useless action to take. If I get to the point where I see, which is the whole point of this talk. Let's bring up the last key lesson, please. Oh, good. Here it is. Until we can see that the pain of unconscious resistance marks the end of that path to that point, we will never be able to see, let alone realize, the possibility of discovering any other path past that moment. Until we can see that the pain of unconscious resistance marks the end of that path to that point. Follow me, this is such an important idea. I have an idea, I have a belief, an image, I have something, I follow it, I do it, I can't help it. That's the action that suggests I take it. But when I come to the moment where suddenly that path that I'm on, there's no further to go. How do I know because suddenly I'm filled with resistance to anything that's challenging where I thought I was going. That is the end of that path. Resistance marks the end of the known path. Because what are you resisting other than in that moment what's threatening the known? So the next path has to do with going beyond the resistance and entering into what is unknown. Because you'll never enter into what's unknown, which becomes the next body for you, until you realize this resistance doesn't want to get past itself. It doesn't want to go past what it knows. So it reinvents itself. It recreates itself endlessly. And I don't know, it's a useless action to let my own negative states tell me how to reinvent myself. The last comment I'm going to make. There is nothing more useless than painful resistance other than the negative reactions that it gives rise to. There is nothing more useless than a negative reaction that you are identifying with. Period. If I knew that, and not just with my intellect, but through direct perception, what would happen when that came up? Would I be free of it instantaneously, or is it there? And for the first time in my life, instead of a useless action, I have the new choice of being aware of what is a useless action and observing that consciousness trying to lay down a path for me that has proved itself useless 10,000 times. I come to the end of that path. Resistance can only take a condition and produce out of it a reaction. When you realize the reaction to this, whatever you're resisting, is just the way in which that resistance is hiding itself, disguising itself, you reach up and do what? I didn't have an example. I wanted to tell you a story. I'm out of time. Pull the mask off. Would you like to pull the mask off of every unwanted moment in your life? Wouldn't you? I've described how to do it. You pull the mask off by seeing that you're standing in front of something, that moment that has disguised itself. That excuse, that action, that all of those things that we have just proven are useless, I just can't do it. And God help me, I paraphrase St. Paul, I don't do the actions that I would, I do the useless actions that I would not. Well, one day I just have to stop doing the useless actions, don't I? Where am I going to get the courage to stop doing the useless actions? It's going to come to me from the intelligence of recognizing that only a fool picks up a useless action and believes it's going to free him from his pain. The useless action is the continuation of the pain, not the path to the end of it. The useless action is the continuation of the pain, not the end of it. You understand that? So the exercise, simple. What's on the other side of this unwanted moment? What's on the other side of my resistance? I never find out what's on the other side. We know intellectually on the other side of the resistance is the flow, but I've never found actually what's on the other side of resistance. Why? Because resistance gives me a bunch of useless actions to take. So what I'm trying to do in this talk, and I'm done with it, is get you to see, you know what? I may not like it, but these things that I do all the time on a daily basis are useless actions. And I know if I take a useless action, it's going to deliver a what? A useless result. And I'm tired of useless results. Because when I come to another useless result, it offers me what? Another useless choice. And round I go, going nowhere. So here I am, I'm starting to feel resistance. What's going to happen? What does this mean? What are they going to do? Where's this going to go? What's going to happen? And I realize the problem isn't the moment. The problem is a consciousness that is sure the moment shouldn't be that way, and there's no such thing as the moment not being the way it is. So I'm going to sit back and let all of these useless actions and their suggestions pop up. And if you've ever done this long enough, it doesn't just throw one useless action at you. Because maybe you know, eating a whole pizza at 1 o'clock in the morning isn't good for you. I'll wait for you to get that. Is that a useful action? No. So it throws the old eat a package of cupcakes distraction out. You know that I'm smarter than that. You're right. Let's go watch TV. Now there's a useful action. Catch the useless actions as they're being suggested. Recognize them for what they are and dare to go beyond the resistance in the consciousness that keeps giving them to you. And you will discover the joy of self-knowledge. Let's take a break.
Looking forward to seeing those of you who will join us here live, and all of you online are also invited to join us as well. Great topic, as you see. Guy's going to continue this theme, talking about there is no greater joy in life than this. He'll be talking Friday night at 7 p.m., and then again on Saturday morning about 11, and then again on Sunday at 9:30. So hope you can join us live, and if you can't, hope you'll join us online as well. And as we've been telling you, there is a replay package. If you wish to purchase or get access to the MP3 and MP4 files on the talks that Guy gives over this weekend, you can go to guyfinley.org/package and find out how to get access to that. So we invite you to do that. Also, a reminder that Guy will be busy on Saturday because he will also be speaking on InsightTimer.com's live event. And the topic on Saturday is how to ask for and receive a new start in life. And so hope you can join Guy for that morning session as well on Saturday. And then finally, just again, a reminder and a thank you to those of you who have donated in the past to help us. We are a nonprofit organization here, and our mission in sharing these ideas around the world would not be possible without the help of many others, such as yourself. And so if you're willing, if you're able to help us in this mission, we encourage you to go to our website at guyfinley.org/donate. And there you'll find information on ways you can help us regularly or just once if you're able to. And we are a nonprofit organization, as I said, and all donations made in the United States are tax deductible. So thank you again for your support. We very much appreciate it. All right, let's go back to the main room, and we'll see if Guy is ready to start our Q&A session with him. Are you ready to go, Guy, or anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think I've said it. We can start and have a nice dialogue. Students can come up if they want. We've got 20 minutes or so. We can get going if there is anywhere to go.
You bet. We have 2 written questions to start with, and I'll invite the people online to click and raise your hand if you want to talk to Guy directly, or send in some more written questions, and we'll be happy to relay them to Guy. Here is the first written question, Guy. It was left over from Sunday's class. It came in from Edna, and Edna asked, "Can you speak to this consciousness in action? I notice a distortion in my understanding that this peace or connection is available only in passivity or meditation. Yet there are responsibilities, parenting, etc. to integrate," she asks.
This is a fine question, Edna. It goes right to the heart of so many unspoken questions, misunderstanding that is very commonplace in a world where the image has taken the place of the thing. Never have I said, nor would I, that this joy, this peace is due to a passivity. It is the furthest thing from that. We are presently, Edna, without knowing it, living in a constantly passive state. We are passive to our own reactions. We are passive to this resistance I just spent an hour discussing. But when I feel this sudden resistance because I don't like what you've said, or I don't like what's going on, or I don't like how the moment's unfolding, that in the moment that I'm filled with that resistance, I have never felt more active in my life. Because now I know what's wrong. Now I know how to fix it. Now I know the action to take, and I believe that the action that I'm about to take proves that in one way or another, I am actually active in the moment when the action I'm being given is a passive response to me identifying with this resistance. So I'm completely passive in that moment. That's how upside down things are. True activity is being aware of passivity. True activity is being aware of this passive nature. And then properly, in the awareness of that passive nature, being passive to anything that we're being told to do by that nature as it's observed, so that I'm watchful. Boy, you want to talk about, I know this is hard to understand, and God willing, before I kick this body off, you'll understand that you can't be more active than you are given to be every moment of your life. You're looking for things to do instead of discovering what you are. And what you are is a point of intersection between heaven and earth, where the will of the earth needs to be passive to the will of heaven. But in order for the will of earth to be passive to the will of heaven, it has to be actively engaged in the moment when they meet, so that it can understand itself and bring into that moment a light the darkness doesn't understand, and then let the light act. So that's the real activity, which requires being properly passive. It's not confusing. Did you understand that, what I just said? Edna, I hope you understand that. People say, if I'm just passive like you're talking about, I like saying this, I'm going to be a vegetable. You're already a you're already a zucchini with legs, okay? You just don't know yourself that way. And the funny thing is, I'm terrified of not taking useless actions. That's extraordinary. It really is. I'm actually afraid of not doing what's useless. But one day, if I actually see that fear always is giving me useless things to do, I'm going to go, I don't think so. And then I'm going to leave the known and enter into the unknown, which I'll talk about on Insight Timer Saturday. Back to you, John.
All right, Guy, we'll go next to Gloria, who's raised her hand in the queue. So hello, Gloria, you're unmuted now.
Good evening, Guy. It's been a while.
Hi, Gloria.
This just hit the core of my heart tonight, because it's what I'm always consistently working on, what I catch myself in doing in unconscious thought. And I'm just always striving to improve myself by doing the inner work. And I know that it's the inner work. And it's not easy, but boy, let me tell you, it is well worth it.
Yes, it is.
It does bring me that peace, and I'm just working on myself of letting go of all fear and just dipping my toes into the cold water without thinking, oh, how cold is that going to be before I do that, which is putting that thought into it without just going into it.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful, Gloria. Never forget the process of discovery. Here, I'll phrase it this way. This is an important idea I didn't get in the talk. Resistance always wants instantaneous satisfaction. Resistance always wants instantaneous satisfaction. That's the nature of it. I don't want this, what I want is that. It imagines what it wants, then it pursues that in a useless action, because whatever resistance has told you to get is feeding the nature of resistance, not your release from that consciousness. Do you understand that? So, Gloria, the task is to recognize, as you've pointed out, that I need to do this work. I need to be present to myself, and I need, as best I am capable of doing, of recognizing, in the instance of tonight's talk, where is it that suddenly I don't want this moment. I don't want you to be like that. I wish I wasn't the way I am. In that moment, I must be very, very clear, present to the part of me that is trying to, that is giving me an action, that's it, that is giving me an action to take to be free of resistance. There is no action to take to be free of resistance. If you want to use the words, the action to take to be free of resistance is to not resist the condition or yourself, to observe. Observation is not an action, it is a state of being. Understood? That's a pretty important distinction. I hope that you got that, Edna and Gloria. Let's go on, John.
All right, Guy, I'm coming back on. Our queue is wide open, so I invite people online to join us. In the meantime, here is a question from Susanna. Susanna asks, so what do we do when resistance comes up? Tell ourselves, my feeling of feeling rejected is useless, and then what? Do we start saying affirmations to the point of hypnotizing ourselves? I am worthy, I am wonderful. People who don't value my company are not worth my time, etc.
We'll get there, Susanna. In the moment of an unwanted circumstance, you must see through direct experience that there is nothing more useless than talking to yourself. Who's talking, Susanna? Who's the one that's seen the problem? Who's the one that didn't? What's being explained by all of these actions that my thoughts are giving me to take? That's where that consciousness hides. And I'm complicit with that consciousness as it hides in that resistance, because I believe unless I have a solution in the split second of that suffering suffering will go on and I'll never escape it. That's what that consciousness wants you to believe, that you must do something to escape the suffering it creates. You want to escape the suffering that it creates? Stop trying to escape it. Start seeing it, Susanna. Here's an exercise just for you, but it's for everybody. The next time I suddenly feel rejected, I'm simply to notice as if someone threw a stone in a pond. I'm not the stone somebody threw in, and I'm not the pond into which it was thrown. But I am the marriage of the stone and the pond and everything that is rippling through me in that moment. Let me just see that. Let me not derive my identity from the kind of stone that was thrown. Let me not come up with a plan based on the kind of ripples that are in the consciousness. Let me just be purely and simply the witness of the whole movement of the stone into the consciousness, into the waters of this mind, and what comes out of that. And then leave all of that alone, because if I do, I'll see the stone is not responsible for the ripples. There had to be a body there to receive it, and the ripples are never going to change the stone that was thrown into it. But if I let the resistance come and go, all the ripples will disappear, the stone will be gone, and I'll be there the wiser woman for not having participated in a useless action called thinking about the circumstance. For now, that's the best I can do, Susanna.
All right, Guy, Beatrice just sent in this question for us. She says, hi, Guy and everybody. Could you please expand about the state of being that you mentioned in regards to observing? Thank you.
If you never saw in person, say, the works of a Michelangelo, you never were in a concert of master musicians playing something of Bach or Beethoven or Handel's water music, right in the midst of all that, how could you ever explain to somebody what that's like? You can't do it. Beatrice, can you explain it? I know you've had moments we wouldn't be together this long in our studies. Can you explain to somebody what it's like at that 6 o'clock hour when the sun is setting and the light takes on that transformational color and everything dances in it? Can you explain to somebody that moment where you are the observer separate from the observed? That's being. That's being. And the reason it can't be explained is because there's no one there. It's just being. There's not the beauty outside. There's not the beauty inside. There is the beautiful moment given to that consciousness in which it realizes its being. Its being holds all things. You're made in the image of the being that made you. You can't describe being. Men and women have been writing poetry and just writing books about the divine for thousands of years. Practice. Here's the problem. I'm giving Beatrice this answer, and the odds are, although I know she's a willing soul, I'm frustrated. Well, what's my being in that moment? I'm frustrated. Is the frustration because of what I said? Or is the frustration because I can't understand what I was told? So my being is a state of not understanding. If I actually don't understand, why do I have a problem with it? Because I want to. I mean, that's that simple, isn't it? I want to. Well, you'll never understand that way. This is the paradox of the true spiritual path. The more you want to understand, the further away you are from it. Because the wanting belongs to a nature that is trying to get something and become something. So desire, by its nature, creates second force. That's why Christ said you can't serve two masters. You'll love one another. Desire creates second force. So the more I want something, the more I'm actually pushing it away. Because I'm identified with the want, and I can't be identified with what I want and actually get what I want, which is freedom from my wants. Because that's the pain. And I can't have a want without not wanting. Resistance. This isn't double talk. These are spiritual facts. We have this idea about being. We do. Think about Jesus. You don't know what anyone who has ever awakened had to go through in order to be able to talk to you about being. And I guarantee you it wasn't autographs and sunglasses. It wasn't a party. It was an immense labor. But it was a labor that was full of light. Be what you are. Be what you are. If you don't want to be what you are, then you're not being what you are. You're divided. There's no division in being what you are. Mind, heart, body, connected. Being. Not mind here, heart there, body wishing it were eating something. Connected. We'll go into this, by the way, Friday night. Let's go on, if there's any place else to go.
Well, Guy, I'm out of written questions, and right now we have no hands in the queue. Oh, Rebecca just raised her hand, so we'll go talk to Rebecca. Hello, Rebecca.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Rebecca.
I trust you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, because I'm technically challenged, so, or this consciousness is. Anyway, Guy, as always, and everyone in the room, everyone listening, just deep, 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 deep gratitude. I'm all in the midst of this. Yeah, there's no escape, Rebecca. You gotta face, what the true reality is. I can't say I know how that looks, but I just want to sit with it in my little home, the Crucible. So I just really resonated with just appreciate what you said. Just wanted to come in and always please know, I'm sure there are many, many people who are in deep gratitude for you, Guy. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks. And thank you for my new home, the Crucible. It's very uncomfortable.
You're very welcome. So the last comment I'll make before we go, as an encouragement, and a lead into our weekend, you might want to write it down, something to contemplate. The joy you seek is unimaginable. It is unimaginable, which means the only way that I come into that joy is when I've finally gone beyond imagination, when I've been stripped of every action I know to take to save myself. Then I find the joy of the unimaginable. See you Friday. Be safe. Do your work. Nice if everybody was different. Really nice. Really nice.